All right, hello everyone. Hopefully you still have your file on track from last time. We're going to finish up your Hello Winter piece. If you weren't here last class, I will upload my copy so that you can pick up where everybody else kind of stopped last class. But it shouldn't take the whole block. Should be pretty quick, actually. We're just going to finish up a couple of things that I want you to know how to do. So number one, the first thing I want you to know how to do is just work the layers a little bit easier in Adobe Illustrator. So if you look over on the right-hand side of your screen, over by the properties panel area, we do have layers in Adobe Illustrator. They're not down at the bottom like we're used to in Photoshop. They are typically kind of hidden away or minimized. But if you look for an icon that kind of looks like a stack of papers, mine happens to be down here, but yours might be floating in a slightly different place. So if you see a little stack of papers, hover over it, it should say layers. I want you to go ahead and click on that. Okay, a couple of things I want you to be aware of in layers for Adobe Illustrator. You will see some things that you're used to, like there is a little square with a plus sign to make a new layer. There's a trash can where you can delete layers, but there are also some new functions. So we recognize the eye, right? You can turn on and off an eye and it will make your things kind of visible or not visible, depending on the setting. There is this blank square right here. When you click this blank square, it will lock the layer. So instead of having to hit a lock button somewhere else, you just click that blank square to turn a lock mechanism on and off. Very simple. Okay. One other thing that's a little bit different about Adobe Illustrator is you'll also see a little colored stripe on every layer that you have. By default, the first layer is always blue. And so whenever you click on an item that's on that layer, it's going to have a blue outline. Its bounding box is going to be blue. But when you make a new layer, which I want you to do, so make a new layer really quick. When you make a new layer, it will have a different colored stripe. And anything you put on that layer will have an outline that is that color. And it's meant to just kind of help you keep up with what is where and where it's placed inside of your various layers. So if you didn't already, make a second layer. And just like in Photoshop, we can drag and rearrange these. I want you to pick up layer 2 and drag it underneath layer 1. Okay. And what we're going to do really quick is we're going to make the background the sky, as well as this little border that's kind of tan running around the edge of the paper. Okay. I know you guys are smart. I know you know how to paint things and make things really well, but I do want you to start to think about Adobe Illustrator a little bit differently and think about building your pictures in different ways. So if your layers are kind of in your way, you can pick them up and move them, just like in Photoshop, you can rearrange them. You can also hit these two little arrows right here and just kind of stick them back into place, minimize them out of the way. So if we are on layer 2, make sure you are clicked on layer 2. Sorry, I didn't mention that before. We're going to use the shape tool to create these. So I want you to always think about working from the back to the front. Okay, so the backmost piece, in my opinion, is this kind of beige tan border. So I'm going to make that first and then build the sky on top. So I'm going to go over to my toolbar and I'm going to find the rectangle tool. Okay, it's apparently the letter M in Adobe Illustrator. I didn't remember that offhand, but I'm going to grab the rectangle tool and I'm just going to draw a rectangle over the entire page, just like so. Okay, now when you drop it, anytime you make a color or a new shape in Adobe Illustrator, it will remember whatever color you chose last in this particular document, and it will fill with that color. Okay, so right now my color is the same color as my mountain. So that's the last thing that I happen to have colored in. So just remember, you can hit the letter I and it will bring up your eyedropper tool. Your eyedropper tool is also on your toolbar, and you can just kind of quickly grab that color and color that in. Just make sure when you grab the color that you avoid the snow pieces and that you avoid the watermarks that say Christopher Bryant. We don't want to pick up the colors from those sections because it's a little bit different. Okay, cool. So if I'm done coloring that in, I'm going to go back to the rectangle tool. Okay, if you look at the sky in this original picture, it is also just kind of a big rectangle. So I'm going to draw a large rectangle. Everything will stack on top of everything else. So it's not going to matter if I've got a little extra. Eventually it's going to kind of get covered up. So what I'm going to do is just start to draw a new rectangle. Just going to draw it right there just like that. And now by default, it's going to be that same tan color because that's the last color that I picked. But I can grab my eyedropper tool. Okay, and I can click back here on the sky just like I did when I was making the border and fill that in. And just as a reminder, okay, you can always go back to our regular selection tool. Okay, that is the letter V as in victory. So if you hit the letter V, the regular selection tool just kind of lets you move things around. But I think it's a little bit better in Illustrator than Photoshop because it will also let you transform your shapes. So if you drew your shape and the border doesn't look quite right, or it doesn't kind of match up with your mountains, take a second, go back to the move tool and just kind of place it correctly, kind of fill it out. It's perfectly fine if the stripes aren't 100% even, but try your best to make sure that both rectangles we just drew take up the page and they kind of mimic that original image that we're copying, okay? And then just for the sake of making sure that we back everything up always, hit save. Okay? So hit save. Now, I know a few of you worked ahead of me. You got a little bit further along. At least as far as I'm concerned, what I did on the screen last time was I got done with the mountains and the snow, and we made the trees. Okay, so a few of you have already done the ground snow, and some of you have already started or are finished with the barn, but I'm going to do that again with you. Okay, so just kind of, if you need to fast forward to whatever's relevant to you. So again, I'm going to go back to the layers panel. Okay, remember right now we're on layer 2, which is back behind the mountains and trees. All right, if I'm looking at my picture, my ground and the barn need to be on top. Okay, I'm working my way forward from the back. So the mountains are further back in the picture than the barn and like the grassy ground area. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and make a new layer. Okay, make layer number 3. And if I look at that, these are going to be green items. So if I click on those rectangles I just made, they have that red outline because they're on a red layer. If I click on the mountains, they have a blue outline. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to lock layer 2 and layer 1 just so they don't move around or get in my way. Okay, so make sure you are selected on layer 3 so you can actually do stuff. And I'm just going to tuck that back away. So I'm going to grab the pen tool. Okay, I'm going to grab the pen tool. And I'm just quickly going to come over here to my picture on the left, and I'm going to drop one dot. I'm going to stretch it across here. I'm going to drop another dot. I'm just going to make 4 pins or 4 points, come right across. Okay, and then make sure you always connect it back. Now, I did cover up my snow, but the snow color is the same as the trees. So I can hit the letter I, and I'm just going to grab my tree color and that color that in for me. Okay, and then if I go back to the move tool, so hit the letter V, go back to the move tool, you could just pick it up and kind of place it. Now, I didn't perfectly line mine up on this page on the left last time, so I might need to kind of adjust a few things personally. Just remember, we did lock our layers. So if you need to move like your trees or your mountains, unlock that layer first. But I'm just going to kind of pick up my trees. They're kind of buried in the snow. I'm just going to kind of scoot them up really quick so that mine looks a little more correct. But again, adjust yours and you could just kind of eyeball it. Just look at that picture on the left and try to make yours look similar. Right. And again, if your snow and stuff doesn't quite match up, I'm just going to click on my little snow patch. I have a little edge right there on the right where it doesn't quite line up. If I'm on the move tool, the letter V, I could very quickly and easily just kind of stretch that over and make that work. And nobody knows that ever happened and it's fine. Okay. All right, cool. Now let's build the barn. All right. As a reminder, in Adobe Illustrator, you can hold down the space bar at any time and click and drag, and it'll let you kind of move around just like in Photoshop. You can hit Control+ to zoom in. So I'm going to do that really quickly. Now, if we look at this barn, we got a couple of different shapes in here. Kind of have a pentagon shape, and then we got some different sort of rectangles that are at different sort of skews. I'm going to look at everything based on color, like we talked about last time. So I'm going to make each color a separate piece. So there's a lighter red right here, a darker red, and then a roof. I'm just going to draw each one of those with the pencil. Easy peasy. Okay, so grab the pen tool. If you are trying to learn the quick commands, the letter P is the quick command for the pen tool. But remember, just work in points. The pen tool by default makes straight lines. So just every time you need to bend the line or turn at a different angle, just make a point there. And if your points aren't perfect the first time, we can adjust them. Now, if you're drawing and yours is doing exactly what mine is doing, it's filling in and that's annoying you because you can't see. Remember, you can just come over here to the bottom of your toolbar and you've got your 2 different little squares like in Photoshop. The one that looks like a donut that has a hole missing in the middle, that's the outline color. The one that is a solid square, if you click on it, is that fill color that it typically fills in as you draw. You can hit this little white X, right, or a little white box with a red line through it right here, and it'll turn that off. Now, if it's hard for you to see your lines, you can click on the donut, and if you give it a good double click, it'll let you pick a color. And sometimes I'll pick out a color that is totally opposite of what I'm tracing, just so it's a little bit easier for me to see as I go. And then I could turn that color off later. Okay, so I drew mine really quickly. And if I look, I didn't quite line it up right. So let's go back to our move tools really quick. But if you weren't here last time, we introduced a new move tool. Okay, Adobe Illustrator has two different arrows. It has the regular old selection tool that lets you move stuff. And then it has what's called the direct selection tool. And that is the arrow that is completely white and completely filled in. Click on the direct selection tool if you need to move around some of your points to make them kind of match up. Like right down here, this point doesn't quite line up with the original, so I'm going to move it a little bit. I don't have to redraw it or anything like that. I could take my direct selection tool, I can click right on the point, and the only thing that's going to move is that particular point, not the rest of the line. And whenever you do click on a point, you can actually use your arrow keys. So I can hit up and down or left and right on my arrow keys, and it'll move the point that way too. Okay, but if I'm done with that, I'll just go back to the regular move tool. Remember, you can hit the letter I to get your eyedropper. I'm going to fill that color in, and I'm just going to keep going. Okay, so I'm just going to come over here. I'm going to quickly draw this, even though there's a tree behind it. I know that line comes straight down. Okay, knock out this shape. Okay, now remember, I just covered up this different color. So I can come over here to the bottom, turn that color off, just so I can see, and then I can use my eyedropper to fill it in. And I'm going to do the next couple of things a little bit quicker. Okay, so I'm going to draw this next piece right here. And again, that fill color just filled automatically from the last time. I know that's the same color as the snow because it's supposed to be kind of a snow-covered roof. So I'm just going to grab that color. And then there is a tiny little line right here. So I'm actually going to use a new tool for that one. If you look over on the toolbar, right next to the letter T, the type tool or the text tool, there's a little line. Okay, and I could just take this line and draw one across here. Now, when I first draw it, it's not going to look very good, but I'm going to let go. And actually, my line is invisible. Right now, it has no color on it whatsoever. But just like in Photoshop, you've got all these different options up here at the top. There's an options bar running across here. And remember, the little donut shape is the outline color. So if I drew a line, the donut shape is going to be the color of that line. So I can actually come up here. There's a little donut right here as well. And I can pick a color here. Okay, I can also just hit the letter I and it'll grab my color. Now, because this is a line and not a shape, it doesn't fill in anything. So when it grabbed that color, it copied that this was a fill. It was the inside color of a shape. Okay, and that's not what I need right now. That's the right color, but that's not what I need. But I can easily come over here and remember this little reverse arrow that lets you flip-flop. I'm just going to flip-flop it. So now that color is on the line. And now my line shows up. Now you can also adjust the width or the weight of your line. So if I look up here where it says stroke, typically by default, it'll be 1 point. But if yours is not, or if it's not like thick enough to see, you can always turn it up or turn it down. There's also a little drop down and you can just kind of adjust how it looks. I'm going to leave mine at 1. That's perfectly fine. Okay. And then I'm going to hold down the shift key. So hold down shift and I'm going to click on each piece of my barn all at once. So I'm going to click on, make sure you get the little line that is the roof, you get both red pieces and the larger roof rectangle. And I'm actually just going to hit Control X. Okay, I'm going to cut it. I'm going to hit 0, Command 0 to zoom out. And then I'm going to scoot myself over here to this other picture. And if you guys remember, when you cut in Photoshop, whatever the center of your screen is currently, when you hit paste, it's going to try and put it right in the center. So if you hit Control V, it's going to try and put it in the center. And then I'm just going to kind of set it where it needs to go. Okay. Okay. If it does cover up your tree, I know the tree's in front of it in the original picture. We're not going to worry about rearranging those. Just scoot it over a little bit. We'll talk about how to put things in front of one another in different ways a little bit later. Okay. But hit save. All right, so that's the basic build of the majority. I missed a mountain, didn't I? Did a good job. Just now realized that. Sorry. It's my other mountain. I'll fix that in a second. But yeah, now we have the majority of the scene kind of drawn and sketched out and placed, and hopefully you've saved everything and it's all kind of backed up. Now what we're going to work on is we're just going to look at text and we're going to make a pattern for the snow. Okay. Now, because everybody is kind of at different places and working on different things, I'm going to stop this video here. I'm going to have 2 shorter videos for each of those things. All right. Thanks, guys.